Welcome back to the Hiding for Horrors podcast, where we review horror movies and horror movie franchises. I'm Mark, and instead of my two amazing co-hosts, I am joined by a special guest, YouTuber Dead3y3 or Aiden, which he said I can call him both. So I don't know. I'm probably going to switch off. See how I feel throughout the podcast. But Aiden, aka Dead3y3, can you introduce yourself? Give us a little, let the people know who you are.
Hi. I go by Dead3y3 on YouTube predominantly, but Mark and I are kinds of friends, so Aiden is fine there. I play a lot of action RPGs, roguelikes, indie games in general, and I've been trying to push a little bit more towards horror, so this is a good move in that direction. And I've been streaming a little bit more lately. I used to just do recorded videos, starting streaming, so a lot of new things on the table right now.
Yes, and him streaming video games and wanting to stream horror games is what brought us here, because today we're reviewing Detention, which was released on Netflix in 2019. I apologize to everyone, but I'm going to butcher these names. I've been trying to practice them, but I still don't think I got them right. Directed by John Hugh, and written by John Hugh and Fu Kai Ling and Chen Shi Kang. So sorry if I mispronounced all those. Not if, I definitely mispronounced all those names. I really tried. But to move away from this awkward moment, Aiden, can you please give them the plot summary?
All right. In 1962 Taiwan, a group of students join an underground book club hosted by their counselor. One day, the counselor vanishes into thin air, and the students' search for him takes them to a realm dominated by ghosts and spirits.
Yeah, and I mentioned that Aiden's wanting to get into horror games is what brought us here, because this movie is based off a video game, and I kind of found this movie by accident. I have a thing of buying video games that are based off movies and TV shows, because I don't know. I've played Buffy, and I played all the Spider-Man movie games and Scarface. I just have a weird obsession with games based off like other media, and I found this. Embarrassingly, I was looking through a Wikipedia, like video games based on it. So then it gave me movies based off video games, some of which I've seen, like DOA and Street Fighter. And then this one appeared, and I was like, oh, this is different. This is new. And I watched a couple walkthroughs, and I was like, oh, this looks spooky and right up my alley. But I'm really bad at, video games, especially PC games. I am not a PC gamer. I've tried. It's not something I can do. And then when I connected with Aiden, I was like, oh, I wonder if this would be something that he's interested in. And we did a stream, and stream was part one. This is part two. But overall, like I love a good like spooky ghost story type of thing. I love when it like the movie kind of confuses you and makes you think, and it, even though it's like a ghost story and it's like supernatural, it also has grounded in realism, because it deals with like actual things that are happening during that time, and like why these characters are in this situation. So it was interesting movie, interesting game. They're slightly different. I can't really tell if one's better than the other. But what were your overall thoughts on the movie and the game?
Well, I think there were some pretty important differences from movie to game. The movie I thought was definitely great overall. There were some kind of sloppier areas. I think in terms of sloppier areas, I think some of the CGI was a little bit iffy here and there. But most of the movie isn't really focused on that, and I think there were a lot of interesting messages and character dynamics. The characters were really kind of compelling. It was all in another language, so a lot of reading throughout. There were some lines, though, that really kind of stuck with me. I'm excited to talk about some of what I didn't notice the first time. On the first watch, I ended up watching it a couple times. The second watch, there was a lot more there that I just didn't piece together while I was going. So the first time around, and then the game versus the movie. There's a really noticeable difference in the world in the game versus the movie. In the game, you're in this, I think, purgatory-like space, and you're really following Fang, whereas in the movie, there's a lot more focus on two different characters, Fang and Wei. And then you're sort of in like a nightmare. It's a little bit different of a feel. The enemies are different. Everything feels just a bit different in the movie versus the game.
Yeah, and also the difference, we get more of like Way's backstory when it comes to like her infatuation with the teacher. You learn more about the because like you get drops and hints about the book club and like
Yeah.
what's going on, but the movie like really explores that more.
Hmm.
And some of the imagery of just like the imagery outside of like all the ghost and like spooky stuff when you're just watching how they're being oppressed and
Hmm.
how they were afraid to just like you know they had to smuggle in books. They could have been
Hmm.
arrested for that. Like, that was all like that was
Yeah.
like you know I like how the movie expanded on that.
It feels a lot clearer in the movie too. Like playing the game, it felt like little pieces are here and there, and you're kind of slowly piecing together what's even going on. In the movie, we
Hmm.
kind of get right into the action at the very beginning of the movie. You've got Wei getting tortured, uh, which was like, okay, so we're talking about like the martial law. We're talking about there's something clearly sort of violent towards the students there. In the game, you're starting off, you're just in a classroom. You do see kind of military sort of guy there by really early on, but there's no clear threat to the students yet, unlike in the movie.
Well, since you went there, I guess we can start on like scenes
Mm-hmm.
from the movie that like
Mm-hmm.
stood out to us, good, bad, or indifferent. And for me, that opening scene was
Mm-hmm.
it was an attention grabber. Like I was hooked from the beginning
Mm-hmm.
because just seeing that it was just I know I kind
Yeah.
of expected it to open the same way uh, the
Mm-hmm.
game did, with just like them in the classroom. You see the inspector walking by, but that's not how it is. Like you're literally
Right.
thrown into like an interrogation, and like there's stuff
Mm-hmm.
happening,
Yeah, and it's
and then
it's
they
pretty
wake up in
significant.
an abandoned room. Yeah, so
Yeah,
like they're
sorry. That first scene is pretty significant too. Like we have the line where Wei says like I would never rat on anybody. Like this kind of feeling of like okay, he is super super loyal. We're getting character motivations or kind of what they're about really early. And I think the importance of that didn't really hit me the first time watching the movie, but having seen the way that it ends, the way that it progresses, it's a pretty important little part for that character right away before you know who they are, which I think also makes it so that the movie there's a lot of reasons why, but the movie feels like you could watch it a couple times for sure and catch a lot of things. um
yeah. And
I
then for me
think
also
okay.
like that last scene because I was not expecting
Yeah.
like like he was
Oh
just gonna
yeah.
be just gonna be alive
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
and
it was
like
actually annoying the first time.
not just alive,
Yeah.
but like he had like an extended life. I was like,
Hmm.
what the hell? So that was like
Right.
kind of
Yeah,
tripped me out.
because
What
I
about you?
feel like in almost any media, we're used to there being like purgatory means everyone in this space is dead. We're all in the same spot. We're all dead here. And early on, none of them know that they're in purgatory in either the game or in the movie. But as it goes along, it becomes more and more clear. Like the reason why all these things are happening, they're seeing all these things or whatever. It's like regret or shame or whatever. In the game, the the probably the biggest notable difference between game versus movie. In the game, we're following Fang. We do see Wei for a while, but he's just a piece of the puzzle along with everything else to kind of allow her to see what she's done and to accept it or to reject it, I guess, to allow her to suffer through this in this purgatory state that she's in. Whereas in the movie, I expected that to be the way that it would go for sure as well. That we were just going to find, okay, Fang really Wei is just one of these many components that are used to kind of torture her in this realm. But actually, yeah, Fang is she's not the only one that's important there. Wei carries on in the game. He dies. He's killed so early in the game, and then in the movie he's just there and there and there. It's like, okay, why is he still around? Until eventually, yeah, he just never dies. Really, like in a way, he does. He dies in this dream world, but in the reality, he's actually just still alive, which is a pretty big shock. And when I first watched the movie, it was definitely frustrating because I wasn't expecting it, and so I was like, okay, so this is purgatory, and how is she in purgatory? And he's also in purgatory, but he didn't actually die, so why is he there? Shouldn't he not be there? But on a second viewing, they do mention that this is a nightmare. So he's having a nightmare. It's a little bit confusing, like culturally or whatever. Like in a nightmare, maybe this is like part of some religion or part of something where this makes sense, but definitely a little bit strange that she's in the nightmare. It feels like we're experiencing all these things that he couldn't have possibly known about. So it is a little bit, yeah, like a little bit. I wasn't sure how to feel about that.
I think it was like meant to be open for interpretation because I kind of
Mhm.
took it as yeah, he's having a nightmare, but
Mhm.
from that last scene, just from that last scene alone, I kind of thought
Mhm.
like, okay, he has an extended life because he has all of his like book club members' lives,
Hmm.
and with
Hmm.
that, like when each life dies off, he's haunted by what they've been through.
Hmm.
So his nightmares is him reliving their memories as
Mhm.
that person's lifespan dies off. But that's just something
Yeah.
I just thought that's my own theory.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might be completely wrong.
I hadn't thought of
So
it. Yeah. I feel like I feel like the like one big part. Oh, there are a few different scenes and there's a few different things to kind of focus on. I don't want to bounce around too much because I just saw the movie for the second time, so it's still kind of fresh up here.
you
But
can bounce around. Just go and throw it out.
well,
Throw it
okay.
out.
Well, here's something that that I noticed on a second viewing that I really should have noticed in the first viewing. They do kind of spell it out for you, but sort of. But there's a lot of names that that it's kind of hard to remember each different person. So so there was Shang, who is he's the guy at the very beginning of the movie. Shang comes along, and at first I thought it was Wei just because you don't know who any of the characters are, but it was Shang at the very beginning who has his cap, like his uniform essentially isn't properly in order. As he's coming in, Bai comes along, the military general, whatever, and says, adjust your cap, fix this, fix that. And then inside of Shang's book bag, there is something that's not supposed to be there, which presumably is going to be like maybe one of the books or something like that. And so Shang's there. He's front of the general. He's clearly just terrified. The general can tell that he's afraid. And then Wei comes along, and essentially Wei kind of has a little back and forth with the general, and then says, yeah, take whatever's in your bag out, and then takes it out for him, and it ends up being a doll and not like a book or something more dangerous. And Wei is like, you shouldn't bring that to school, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And the general's like, right, you're going to get in trouble for that if you're not careful. You need to move along, but don't bring that again. And so the reality there seems like, okay, Wei basically just saved this Shen guy's life. Taking that into consideration, so that's their relationship. Shen, right? I think, or Shang. Shang is also the one who later on, he's the one who's supposed to have the journal, and it ends up being that Wei gets the journal instead of Shang. Says, "Oh, I'll pick that up for you," and then gives that over to Fang, who ultimately kind of turns it in, leading to everybody's death. So that action, Shen, I believe, never tells on Wei, because he like basically saved his life. So Wei tells Shang to not to tell anybody because we get in trouble, whatever. Shang doesn't tell anybody. There's this line where when we find Shang in in the dream world or the afterworld or whatever you call it, in this purgatory space, we find him inside of this cabinet. On the outside of the cabinet, written all around it are like betrayer, like death to the betrayer, or whatever, death to the rat. And so everybody thought that he was the one who betrayed them all. And when Wei opens up that cabinet, Shang says things like, "What are you going to beat me up to?" or whatever. These sorts of lines. Beat me up. I think he says something like Wen Xiang or something like that. One of the other kids who was in that group, which I didn't catch the first time because I didn't know who that was. But after watching again and paying attention to the names, I was like, oh, another guy from their group beat this guy like half to death, and according to what he says, locked him in this cabinet or locked him in the shed, presumably to his death. So like one of those characters ended up getting killed because he wouldn't give up Wei, who really got everybody else killed. It's like a whole thing where like I didn't put it together the first watch, but then I was like, wow, there's a whole other thing happening here. Well, okay. Do you remember that part? Do you remember that part where there's the guy and he's in the cabinet. He's locked in a cabinet. I think Shang leaves. He leaves somewhere where he finds. I forget. Shang leaves somewhere and he finds there's this cabinet in the room that looks like there's like dolls hanging from the ceiling. Goes into this room and there's this cabinet with a bunch of words written on the outside. It's got a broom holding it closed, and he opens it up and then opens up the cabinet, and inside is like Shang, basically is his friend. And then his friend ends up playing with a doll. He's got the two dolls. One of them like shoots the other doll or whatever. It was a whole like a little sequence there. But I think that guy got killed by the other members of the group because they thought he was the betrayer when actually Wei is the betrayer. Yeah, it was a whole thing. But but that one, yeah, that was like just like one part that was, I don't know, that I didn't catch on my first viewing.
Yeah, I that you mentioned the cabinets. The cabinets in the video game
Mm,
are checkpoints and save points, and I was just
yeah.
like, how are they going to like incorporate the cabinets into the game and I mean to the movie?
Oh
And
yeah.
that little thing like that, like having someone walk into the cabinet, having to go say like that. I don't know. It seems like
Yeah.
that where they can like present things that happen in the game, but like
Hmm.
not make it so
Hmm.
like the average person who's watching it who's never played a game, it's
Yeah,
just a
right.
regular scene, but it's like a special like little
Hmm.
hint, little Easter egg for people who play the game. So I love seeing the cabinet being used.
Hmm.
Um,
And the song, do you remember that part?
the
There's a part where they play
song,
the song.
yeah.
In the game, it was like in the game it was spooky and significant, whatever. And they played a few different times in the movie, and it was like, oh, that's nice. There were a lot of little nods to the game there. Um,
But then I just
mhm.
when the random character like the ghost would
Mm,
just like pop up and
mhm.
like that one scene
Yeah.
where I think it's Shane when they like
Mm,
appear to Ray and they're like, "Go, you must
mm,
save Way," and I was like, "But like, why? Why is
mm.
Ray going to save Way?"
Yeah, yeah. Her name. Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. Yeah, because it's like
It
Fang
is.
Ray Shin. Yeah, it's like very similar little, yeah, usage words. But um, yeah. I think there's this. Zhang is kind of telling her that once you're dead, you're kind of gone. There's no point. But that with Wei, since he's alive, which I think, yeah, watching the movie the first time was like, I had no idea he was alive at that point. So I'm just like, what?
Mhm.
Why would she do that? And it still also doesn't totally make sense. I mean, she's facing all this guilt. Like, at what point does she recognize that that she got everybody killed or whatever? And even once she does that, does she care about anybody besides the teacher, the Zhang character? Because he was like, it felt like that's the focus, right? She was okay with everybody else dying as long as that one teacher stayed alive. Um, which the whole teacher and Fang relationship was a little bit. It was always a little bit like, I don't know how bad the movie thinks this is. I think that this is pretty bad, but also I don't know how bad it actually is because they're never explicitly like do they ever kiss? Is that like they're a kid and a teacher, a student and a teacher? There's obviously that would be inappropriate. What they're doing is already kind of inappropriate, but I don't know
Wasn't
how
it
far it
kind of the
goes.
same thing with Miss Yin
Mm,
and her like? She knew that Wei had a crush on her, but she kind of
mm.
like she kind of like used that
Oh
to her
yeah, maybe.
advantage. But also, this like bear in mind, this is like set in like 1962, like the
Right.
1960s. So
Hmm. Yeah.
laws were kind of loose. It's also in a different
Sure.
country, so
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I was the whole time
they're
just wondering about that.
yeah. So
Ugh,
like different
yeah.
countries have different
Mhm. Yeah.
age of consent laws. So,
Hmm.
in some countries today,
Hmm.
age of
True.
consent is like 13. So
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
and that's fair. Like it could be a totally different thing in their culture or their like whatever. Like
But
the movie could not be at all
still,
pushing that
student
direction.
teacher is still
It's
inappropriate, no
terrible.
matter
It's definitely
what.
terrible. But like in the way the movie's trying to present it, like that's the whole time I'm kind of wondering, like, are they trying to say this is bad because it's a student teacher, because it's like age difference, any of these things, or is it not bad for that reason? Is it just bad because she's like depressed and he's helping her, but is actually with another woman or whatever? Because Zhang and Yin were kind of clearly there was something going on between them. Because that it rubs you the wrong way a little bit, like it did for me anyway. When Yin is like, you shouldn't be. I told you to just like try to help out Fang, and instead, like I didn't tell you to pull her into your arms. She says something like that, and then she says, "And what about us?" And it's like, oh, it's not. Oh, it does. You don't actually care about this kid at all. Um, so that's always a little brutal.
um,
Mhm.
okay, I wanna go to the scene where she finally realizes that she did it, that
Mm,
she's the reason why everyone's dead. That
yeah.
I I kind of like, were we supposed to feel sorry or have like empathy or sympathy for her at that moment because it was like you literally turned everyone in to
Mm,
save your teacher who you had this inappropriate relationship with,
yeah.
but then he
Well,
still died. Like I just
yeah. I
you could have
think
just said nothing.
I think she's turning them in. There's I don't think that she thought that he was in danger because I think that Fang thought that Zhang wasn't involved at all. Because, like, for example, there's this scene where they're singing after one of the teachers or maybe one of the students is getting beaten during like some anthem, like the flag is raising, they beat this guy, and everyone just kind of
Hmm.
stops singing and stares. When they start singing again, the first person to really sing is that teacher, is like Zhang or whatever Chang. He he starts singing really loudly, probably because he's afraid it's going to happen to him. But we then look at her, and she's like looking at him, looking at the teacher, and probably thinks like, okay, he's very anti-communist or whatever. He's very very passionately in favor of the government. And so I think she just didn't think that he was involved. Her dad, I think part of her turning the notebook in was to help her dad, which that stuff also felt like, ugh, like it's hard to feel for her at that point because the dad is like cheating and abusing the mom. So like the dad, like saving the dad doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I think the bigger thing for her is like to get at Yin, the teacher, to get Yin killed basically, so then she could be with Zhang. Which like, ugh. Yeah, it's pretty brutal. I mean, she's a kid and everything like that, and I get that there's some amount of sympathy to have there. But it is, it's rough.
Yeah, but overall, it's like you got everyone, including yourself, killed for a crush, and it's just I kind of don't feel sorry for you. But the whole scene was kind of just like set up to be like, oh, but feel sorry. I'm just, I don't. She
Zhang,
died. She deserved it.
True. I feel sorry for her in some ways, in that like she's not choosing to be in the positions that she's in. Like she's got this counselor who's supposed to help her out, and then starts this crazy crush thing, whatever going on, and clearly like he's playing into it. Even if he's not like fully acting on it, he's doing a lot to allow for it, and he knows it's happening.
He's not shutting it down like he should.
Yeah. And then her mom is getting like abused in all these different types of ways, and then her mom is also though like pushing away from her in favor of like this religion. That was like, which I'm definitely bouncing here a little bit, but the mom is like praying to Buddha for some kind of answer to what's going on to the dad cheating on her and abusing her, and the daughter comes along and tries to like wipe at her bruises, and the mom kind of like shudders away and doesn't even acknowledge the daughter and keeps praying. And it's like, yeah, like what she's going through, what the daughter's going through right now is pretty bad. Fang's in a bad situation. She's a little like kind of still a kid and whatever. I don't know what age they're supposed to be though, which also makes it complicated.
Because school systems are different in other countries, but I'm pretty sure they're like juniors in high school. I want to say they're definitely teenagers. I think they're like juniors in high school.
Yeah, it's hard to say like how like she got them all killed, but there's a system already in place that allows for that sort of thing. And if you were a kid who was like, it's hard to imagine yourself in a situation where you're living in this type of society. Your parents like the abuse thing, maybe more people could relate to, but then when it comes to like the pressure that you have, where like somebody like Miss Yin, who's with the teacher that is like flirting with you and whatever, who is like trying to steal them away from you in your mind, like you just have the ability to kill this person, and you're a teenager, right?
Yeah,
like it's a little bit hard to
want something and someone's in your way, and there's one particular means to like get rid of it.
Right. Like how often do people have that ability at that age? Like, ugh. Like it's easy to look at it and be like, I would never do that. And I think hopefully you would never do that. But there's like most people, like how often does a 16-year-old have a situation where like the government and like their teachers and their dad and like all these different people would actually encourage them to do this thing, and it leads to an outcome that they would like, where their competition's out of the way, which is just a little bit gross.
The way that they want it, because not only did her competition get out the way, but also her
everybody
object to her desire and her friends. So it's just like, I don't know, it's a lot.
Yeah,
but
it is.
Let's jump right over. This movie doesn't have, it has killed, people died, but we didn't really get to see that for the most part. So we're just going to skip the whole kill part. We're just going to go straight to talking about the characters. I want to start with Miss Yin, because I feel like in some way the whole movie, what happened in the entire movie is because of Miss Yin. Like the whole objective was to get rid of Miss Yin. So what were your thoughts on her?
Well, okay. I don't want to push too heavily back on that, but I think that there is like, there was one thing that I noticed in the movie that like I just want to get through real quick before we move on to Miss Yin, if that's fine.
You go ahead.
Okay. So I think that the thing that's really the hinge point for the movie, there's this line that happened. I didn't notice it, and I would have probably agreed up until just now watching the movie again. There's this line where, well, I guess I'll just go with it. So the line is essentially, when Fang is going to kill Miss Yin, she points the gun at her and says something. Basically, the same thing is said by her mom at a different point. So after the dad is taken away, the mom has this line, which is, "I asked Buddha to get rid of him for good, and or like make him stay away for good," something like that. And then the same line essentially is given by Fang later on when she shoots Miss Yin in this nightmare world, whatever. She shoots her and she says, "I hope you're gone for good," something like that. And it's like these two lines that like "gone for good" or "away for good" or whatever. These sorts of lines are like parallels because the mom has the dad be gone for good. She prays for this, whatever, or she makes it happen. She does something that's kind of really immoral, actually. She reports the dad for communist whatever, and then the dad is now gone for good, and this is supposed to be such a good thing for the mom. But actually, really, it leads to the daughter's death because then the daughter goes and in order to maybe help the dad or whatever, reports all these other people as being the real communists. Her dad wasn't a communist, it was the other people, right? And that's supposed to save everybody. She just has to go talk to Bai, just like the dad tells her to. And in reporting all these people, ultimately it ends up leading to her own death. So the mom causes the daughter's death when she's trying to basically cause the dad's death. And then the daughter causes Mr. Zhang's death when she's really trying to cause Yin's death. And they have this parallel kind of set of lines. So I think like the inciting thing for everything to happen in a way is the mom reporting the dad as a communist, because that then leads or allows for the daughter to do the same thing to Yin, and everybody just dies, which is pretty brutal. but we can carry on to Yin, and it is related to Yin.
For me on Yin, I just feel like yeah, she was aware that Wei had a crush on her, and yeah, she used it to her advantage. But I don't think at any point she would have ever acted on it if Wei would have like tried to pursue it. That's the difference between that's like the main difference. And I liked her relationship. Um, I liked her relationship with Mr. Chang. I feel like I needed Yin to be developed more. I needed more from
Mhm.
Yin. I feel like something
Yeah.
was missing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it felt like her character was like boiled down to just having a couple different roles. Like she's the one technically in charge of the book club, but it doesn't feel like she's super active in that. Like I guess outside of that, so she's in charge of the book club. She talks to Zhang, and technically she's the one that got Zhang to talk to Fang as well. But like outside of that, yeah, we don't really get to know her character that well. I mean, it seems like she's overall though, like everything she does feels pretty solid. Like she doesn't really do anything wrong. She's discouraging Zhang from continuing to do the stuff with Fang, which it seems like that's reasonable because Fang is a student. And she has feelings for Zhang, which it seems like they have some kind of like relationship going on. So that seems fair. She's doing all this stuff, like even with the book club, for example, when they start discovering people and all the stuff with the banning books, whatever, or the banned books being found, she goes straight to the meeting and says, "We're going to stop this whole thing. It's not worth it. It's not safe. We can't keep going because you guys are going to be in danger," which is the right call. Just repeatedly, she makes kind of the right choices, does the right thing. So I really don't feel like, I don't feel like Yin ever really did anything wrong. I can understand why, like just the one line that's kind of annoying that sticks out for me for Yin was that like what about us thing, like as being part of the conversation when it comes to like don't do this thing with a student. Like that's also important, and like your own personal relationships are important, but it feels like Fang overheard that whole conversation, and that kind of like sparks her anger, and I can understand her anger there a little bit. So Yin's like, she's not perfect maybe, but pretty much like she just never really had anything too crazy that she did in the movie anyway.
Her kind of maybe boyfriend, Mr. Chang.
uh yeah, I think game versus movie, I felt like in the game while I was playing anyway, it felt like his relationship with Fang was worse in the game than in the movie. In the movie, it felt like a lot of the time he was just like this sort of guiding role. So it's like reading her this poem, I think about well, he he doesn't read it to her, he reads it to Wei, I guess. There's a point where he reads this poem to Wei, about why it's worth it for him to be doing all the stuff with like the banned books, why it's and why it's worth it to be like their teacher and so on. there's this poem I think that's used a couple different times throughout the movie, which is about how there's like essentially roots, and the roots grow the tree, and the tree is this beautiful and amazing thing, but it wouldn't be possible without the roots. And even though no one really sees the roots, they still have value. And that like that's throughout the movie a little bit, and like that's one of the things that he pushes with Zhang, like with Wei, that like yes. I might never get recognized for what I'm doing, and yes, it is dangerous, but I think that it's still worth it to try to like change your minds and try to help the kids basically, or help them with what they're going through. Beyond that, yeah, the relationship with Fang is kind of iffy, but it still feels like at the end, for example, when when Wei wakes up from the nightmare and is going to sort of tell on everybody, there's this part that happens not too long after that where Wei is back again in the cage, and this time he's with Zhang, and Zhang tells him basically, you've got to live. You like whatever happens, you just have to promise me that you'll survive, that you'll make it through. As Zhang is then going to be pulled off and taken to execution. So it's like, okay, like this guy seems like a pretty good guy generally to the bitter end. So even though his character may be pretty uncomfortable in the game, I felt like in the movie, I didn't see as much of that.
I feel like in the movie it was more so he knew she had a crush on him,
Mm-hmm.
and he liked the attention even though he knew it was inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But in the game, it just felt like that
Yeah.
all just felt so wrong
Mm-hmm.
in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, right.
Like the game took it like the game was just creepy and inappropriate and scary and like
Mm-hmm.
melancholy. But the
Mm-hmm.
movie just like the
Yeah, he was.
movie added
Yeah.
more context,
Mm-hmm.
which made it a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
digestible.
Yeah, it felt like the movie we spent a lot more time in the real world, kind of experiencing what they were going through. In the game, we're mostly in this dream world, and so all we get to see of Zhang or whatever most of the time is just going to be like the letters back and forth between them, which were super
Mm,
like uncomfortable. Whereas that's just a small
very.
part of the movie. It is a little uncomfortable in the movie, like I'm happier now because like whenever I'm with you, I'm happy or something like that. Like those sorts of things, are a little bit weird. But it doesn't feel like Zhang ever reinforces that that's like a good thing. He's more like it's good that you're happy and be like, I don't know. Um, and he pushes back, or he doesn't like when she comes over after her dad gets taken away, and she wants to stay over the night or whatever. He's immediately like, no, you can't stay overnight, and they're starting to talk back and forth, and she says she got nowhere else to go, so he lets her just fall asleep on the table there. But it's not like, it doesn't feel like there's a point where he's trying to take advantage of her at all there, which is like, ugh. Like, because in the game it's like maybe that did happen in the game. There's not like an indication one way or the other how those things go. So yeah, so in the movie he seemed a lot better.
Well, let's talk about Fang. Fang had like yes, her home life wasn't the best, but she sold out her friends and a teacher to not only to do it just to say because she wanted her competition away from her crush, but she also was trying to protect her abusive father. So like
Yeah.
I kind of like had no sympathy for
Hmm.
Fang like at all.
Yeah,
What about you? What are your thoughts?
she is making all of the wrong calls. I think it's tough because I want to feel that a lot of the influences that she has kind of are leading her to where she is. So I want to think like it's not really her fault, and that's a message of the movie. Certainly, that's what they're kind of pushing, is like, you're living in this system, these things happen within this system, but they should have never been allowed to happen. It's not your fault that you're within that. But like, unlike Wei, who really, like, Wei made some mistakes that led to people getting hurt, and he had to like acknowledge and accept and understand that was part of the movie for him. For Fang, like, she didn't make some mistakes, she made actions, she made choices knowing the outcome of those choices. Maybe she has, like, clearly she must have something wrong with herself that's leading to these outcomes, whatever, and like that's fair. But it is a lot harder to feel for her. I do think. Let's see. I do think that with Fang, like, her character, it felt like there's a lot of focus on her character, and it's like some things that were happening. Like with Wei, it felt like there were there was a lot more exploring with Wei of like, okay, what happened and why did it happen and whatever. With Fang, it felt like it was more just like, oh, I did that. I don't want to believe that I did that. That really sucks, because someone who does that sort of thing, that's horrible. But to be fair, I think Fang is meant to have like ended her own life. There's a lot of like there's a lot of her pointing towards like hanging. I don't think that she was hung. I think that she ended her own life. out of guilt over, well, and the tough part is it out of guilt over the people that she hurt, or is it just because Zhang died? Because like even in that scene where they've got, and it's
Oh
actually like a
yes,
really good, yeah.
I agree with you. I do think that she killed herself, and I think the main reason why she's punished the way she is because her guilt is about not that I responsible for all these deaths. She's only
Yeah.
feels guilty about that one death,
Mhm.
and she took
Yeah,
her own
it was
life. So
so
yeah,
yeah, it
I
was
agree with
so
you.
brutal. Like in that, because the first time watching through, I'm still piecing stuff together. The second time watching through, they're in that bunker, and there's all these paintings or whatever on the wall or whatever. There's all these pictures of everybody who died, and then there's just Zhang's picture, and clearly she only cares about that picture. And it's like, oh, like this is not helping your character at all, making it way harder to like you right now because like you should be devastated, but not just because of all these like you should just because of Zhang. Like you killed a ton of people, or led to their deaths, and like to what extent does she know everything? Like she doesn't even know that Zhang is part of this, to be fair. How many people were actually part that she knew of? But she knew that Wei was part of it, so she's willing to kill him. And she's willing to ask him for the notebook knowing that she's going to kill him with it. Like that stuff is like looking somebody in the eye and like trying to convince them to like give you something for you to then kill them. It is, yeah, it's pretty demented. Hmm.
Since you brought up Wei, I have to say that I think that Fang and Wei are essentially two
Hmm.
sides of the same coin. Well, their journey and their characters are pretty
Mm-hmm.
much exactly the same, but the main difference is the things that was responsible for. He did them
Yeah.
accidentally, and he was full of remorse and full of regret. But Fang, she
Mm-hmm.
did them intentionally, and honestly, I don't think she had any remorse or regret about anything but
Yeah. Right. The
change.
only part that was unintentional.
I feel like they're yeah. So I feel like
Yeah.
they're the same,
Mm.
but he actually has remorse.
Yeah.
He has a heart.
Ugh.
She does
Yeah.
not.
That Wei's whole thing was painful. I think like him recognizing the ways in which he had messed up. The I thought that it was interesting. Like the very beginning, or like super early, we get to have him hanging upside down, in his mind saying, "I would never." I like. Well, he says the torture was terrible, and that, but the nightmares were worse, or whatever. But first, I think he says something about like never giving up the secrets, or like he would never do that. There's the one thing that wouldn't happen, no matter how much he's tortured. And this is like a thing throughout the movie. He's saying like, "Yeah, but I would never do this thing." Actually, like in terms of his guilt, there's this part where once they find one of the students or one of the teachers, whichever it is, I think it might have been one of the students, with a notebook or with something from like some communist thing, whatever. Once they find this person and they beat them and whatever, then the book club is supposed to get shut down, and Yin is like spearheading this, like we're not going to keep going because it's too dangerous. And Wei responds that then the students can go get the books. If there's no other way to get them, then the students will take the risk. And the students kind of respond like, well, like what if one of us gets found out, and then what if they tell everybody? And Wei says, if I get found out, I will never tell anybody, and I know that you won't either. And that's how he convinces them, saying like, I definitely won't, but also I trust all of you so much that you would never rat this out. And then the minute that he leaves that class, he bumps into Fang. He drops the journal. She sees the journal, which leads down this path where now she knows that he's involved in it. And then when she asks for the journal, he just gives her the journal. Like, it's so frustrating because, like, although I definitely feel for way more because he did like none of this was intentional, and he does like he has this kind of crush on her as well that leads him down this path. It's it's really frustrating to see him be so passionate about like the importance of this book club, and that he would never tell anybody, that he's such a good person basically, and just to turn around and do something so careless, and kind of lead to everybody's deaths as well. Mm-hmm.
But it's careless because I think he
Mm-hmm.
liked her. He trusted her. I think for him, she was one of the people
Mm-hmm.
that he trusted. So, and for me,
Mm-hmm.
from his perspective, he didn't think that anyone in the book club would say anything, but he also didn't think that
Yeah,
she would say anything.
but but he
That
surely
she
like
broke that.
none of them would have
So
done that. Like no, I think anybody else in the book club would have, like if he were to ask them, okay, is it fine if I do this thing? They would have said no, and he probably knew they would have said no, but he probably thought he was still right to do so. Like I agree though. Like in the same way that he trusts them, like I'm sure he would trust them with the books, and so he thinks like the same thing about this person. But and to be fair, like she does show him that he can trust her by saying like, oh, those were all I saw was your music notes or something like that she hadn't seen, even though clearly she had. Now he knows that she knows anyway. But but it is different. Like her actually having the notebook in her hands is like, it's frustrating. And but then again, if he hadn't given her the notebook, what if she just went to Instructor Bai and told him? I feel like the same outcome kind of happened, so maybe it doesn't matter that much. But still,
Yeah, and that's kind of that's
mm-hmm.
what makes it frustrating because it's just like it's
Yeah.
all because of Fang. Like she
Mm-hmm.
literally, yeah, and that ending when you realize that Wei is
Mm-hmm.
alive, and not only that he's alive, but like he
Mm-hmm.
has an extended lifespan and he's way older than he should be. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, is this a curse or is this
Mm-hmm.
like a blessing? And it, like you really
Yeah.
couldn't. But like I think it's a curse because he's alive, but he's being
Mm-hmm.
haunted by the memories and the ghosts of everyone that he knew, and
Mm-hmm.
that has to be tough. That cannot be
Yeah.
good.
One. There's one scene I think with Wei in particular, Wei and Fang really. The scene where where Wei's hanging upside down and then Fang slices his neck open, which is pretty. I mean, it's pretty brutal. It's not horrible. I feel like nothing in the movie was super scary or really that bad. But in terms of like being brutal, like, that'd be one of the heavier scenes. So she slices his neck open and then she pulls out this journal. I felt like that scene was kind of really well done. Like the popping back and forth between her pulling the journal out and like having it in her hands, and then her handing the bloody journal to Bai, and then her handing the real journal to Bai in the real world that ended up like kind of killing everybody. There is kind of this well, like the parallel there, I guess, is that she is willing to and does like literally kill Wei in her mind. And of course he's still alive, which kind of reduces some of the feeling of that. But she's willing to anyway to kill Wei and take the journal from him essentially and turn it in, like, which just really, it felt really good. Since he's not actually dead, it kind of it doesn't feel as powerful as the scene after the fact. But at the time, it was like, wow, this is kind of heavy. Um, hmm.
Yeah, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But also that scene with the him hanging upside down
Mm-hmm.
and she slicing his throat. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
expecting that
Mm-hmm.
to be translated from
Yeah.
the game because in the game, like they make
Mm-hmm.
you like literally they
Yeah.
make you slash his throat in the game. I was not expecting to
Mm-hmm.
actually see that. So that was
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a
interesting to
few
see.
different like game to movie things were pretty exciting. There was like the teeth, for example. It wasn't there was no importance to the teeth really, but they
Mm.
were there anyway. You had I think it was Gao was the guy's name. He was one of the teachers. And anyway, he was like he had the keys to the school, something like that, and he ends up talking about it like the very like pretty early in the movie when they go in and they want the key to get somewhere, maybe out the gate or something like that. Gao is there with half of his face gone, talking about how he was so loyal to the party, he would have never done anything wrong. All that he did was give the key to one of the kids just so that they could do a regular, like, he regularly does this. It's not an uncommon thing. And he was somehow charged with essentially helping communists or whatever, assisting in that sort of thing. And then he was tortured and then he was killed just over that, which is, I do feel, a lot of that stuff, it's a pretty heavy movie, especially like, because a lot of that stuff is real. I don't know to what extent, but I know there was like execution that happened around this specific topic around that time a lot. And so, but that's just terrible. Like a rumor or somebody just helping in such a small way that's just so routine. But I'm sure that happened because how can you say that he didn't do it knowing that they were communists? And it definitely helped them in their path. Like, yeah, pretty rough. But yeah, he spits out the teeth into that cup during that scene, and you got the 3 teeth sitting there. And of course, all the puppet stuff as well. There's so much like puppet stuff or like head in a bag type of thing. I think that one spot where I felt like the game, it felt a lot more impactful, like a lot better in the game, was there's this part in the game where Fang is aiming a gun at Mrs. Yin and then shoots her, but in the reflection, he's shooting somebody with a bag on their head, which is Zhang. And the meaning there is pretty like 1-to-1, like him killing her is actually him killing this other person that she doesn't want to kill. Or sorry, her killing him, whatever. Her killing Yin. And it was, I think in the movie, they don't really do it that way. But then after, upon rewatch, when she aims the gun at Yin and shoots, she has that line about, Fang has that line about you being gone for good, the parallel with the dad. So it was the mom and the dad. So it was, it came around in some ways, but I really like the visual of the mirror with her shooting Zhang in the background a lot better, I think.
Yeah, the scenes from the game that they chose to recreate, they did it.
Hmm.
I think they did it pretty well. And they like the scenes they
Hmm.
chose to take. They recreated the scenes that
True.
like definitely stood out the most. So I feel like they made
Yeah.
good choices. But we have come to Inspector By. What are your thoughts on him?
Honestly, Inspector Bai I thought was pretty one dimensional. Like his character is the whole time is just like cruel and awful, and the only person that we know that Inspector Bai actually even likes is the dad, and he's the worst. So it's like it's a little bit rough all the way through with Inspector Bai for sure. But he kind of represents like this uncompassionate or cruel cold government. So like it's not like his character doesn't have a use there, and I think that's fine. And especially like once you translate that into this other like nightmare world, whatever you want to call it. In this other world, he can like grow in size. His shadows can creep up the walls. He can be this force of evil because he represents that government. He doesn't have to represent a person with this complex set of ideas. He can just be one dimensional, but that's fine, I guess. I think in this case.
Yeah, I agree with you. He wasn't really a person or a character. He was an accommodate.
Amalgamation
What's
or
the word? An amalgamation of like
Mhm.
several different, well,
Mhm.
of the government itself and what they were putting people
Mhm.
through at the time. So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah. When I was watching the movie at first, I thought like, oh, this guy is kind of bland as a character. Like, there's nothing really here. But
You have any more notes or anything you want to discuss?
I don't know. Scroll through them real quick. Let's see. Well, I mean, there was that the river wasn't bloody, for example. I think that was a kind of a noticeable part. Maybe just because we were kind of joking back and forth about it when it was happening in the game. But the river, when they go out to the bridge and it's collapsed, the river is just a regular river, so it's a little bit less fun. Maybe it would have been too much for budget, or maybe it just wasn't really worth that. Because if the river were bloody, then maybe both of them would have to know, like, okay, we're not in the real world right now. So I don't know if they had seen the. I don't know if they'd seen the Lantern Spirit yet by that point. So maybe that would have been too much of a tip off. I'm not sure why they didn't go for a bloody river there. There was, let's see. Um, hmm. Let's see. Oh yeah, I felt like I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but I felt like in the game I don't remember there being as much focus on the abuse part as in the movie with the mom and the dad. That was another thing that I felt really like in the game. I was kind of like, okay, this guy's cheating on the mom, like that's kind of screwed up, whatever. But like he doesn't deserve to be like sent away. The mom reporting him and potentially killing him is a lot extreme. And then her kind of cold response to it after the fact, it's understandable why the daughter would be really mad at the mom. For like yeah, your dad was cheating, but he like that's like he shouldn't die for it. But then like with the abuse thing, it's a little more understandable because it's like, okay, what else can she really do to keep herself safe in this situation? I think she might have been being abused in the game, but it wasn't as focused on.
Yeah, I think they focus on it more because they wanted us to feel
Mm.
sympathetic to her, or they wanted us to be torn about her decision. But it's like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
torn. She's still completely off.
Yeah, and then and one other thing was I think the enemies. The In the movie and the game they had the lantern spirits, but in the game they had something called the lingered, which were these I don't know these undead creatures that kind of just walk around like they shuffle a little bit, they teleport, whatever, and they were pretty spooky. In the movie, they decided to instead go with basically Fang, just herself with like no face, which I think was. I mean, I think for the direction they were going with the movie made sense. It was a little bit weird though. I don't totally know what the point of having each of them just be different versions of Fang. Like when she sees them later on, she's like, "Oh, that was me from earlier in the movie." It's like I don't feel like that really went anywhere. I don't really understand the purpose of that. Like there are movies where that happens, where there's time travel or something like that, where it makes a lot of sense. But in this one, it's like
Mm-hmm.
it just felt like a little extra thing thrown in that didn't really add anything.
Yeah, there was some random stuff happening, some weird like director creative choices that was like, huh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we didn't
Yeah.
need this, but yeah.
Yeah. I felt like with the like, sorry, this is bouncing around again, but with the animation, I felt like when they really focused on the animation, it showed that it really wasn't. There wasn't the funding for what they wanted. There was one point though that I really what I really liked with animation. Like, so you have the part where the where Wei is outside, out in the grounds or whatever, and there's this other student there who's burning stuff in a fire. He's like, there's a fire pit out there, whatever he's throwing it in, and they're having this back and forth conversation where the student ultimately says like, all we did was read books. Why are we, why is this happening? And Wei just has to, like, is just staring back at him and is clearly upset, and then sees, oh, behind him there's this lantern spirit, and the lantern spirit reaches down and picks him up. The hand of the lantern spirit looks not good in that moment, but then once the lantern spirit picked him up, there's this thread kind of starts like erupting out of his face and like building up into being like into being a bag over his head. I thought the thread part was actually really good. The lantern spirit, at first I was like, oh, this looks kind of dumb, but then the thread starts coming out and I'm like, okay, you're kind of selling me here.
But with that, we've come to the end, but not quite the end, because I'm going to give you guys some behind the scenes info and facts. To start, the budget for this movie was, well, in U.S. money, it was $3 million, and it made $10.1 million in U.S. I'm so sorry, I don't know the conversion on that. I just don't. I'm sorry, guys. Interesting fact: we already said that this movie is based off a PC video game that came out in 2017 with the same name. You can find it on Stream. You can find it on Steam. That's actually where we both got it, and we played it on his stream. There's also a TV show of the same name that was released in 2021. It covers the same themes and kind of the same like martial law, but it's set in the 90s, so it's kind of different. I haven't watched it. I know it exists. This movie is currently banned in China, which I don't know. Well, the communists are being targeted, and China is a communist country, so I guess. Critics' reactions. This currently has an 86% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. A Variety review described the movie as genuinely absurd and entertaining, but noted that it has problems with the narrative and pointing that it has a whiff of sexism. Taiwanese outlets describe the film as likable, chilling, but not downright terrifying compared to the game, which had more jump scares and a more creepier atmosphere. But enough about them and their reviews. But enough about them. What about us? Do we cash or pass Detention 2019? Aiden?
I would cash. Well, I think that it was a lot better than I was expecting it to be honest. I enjoyed the game, but it was a little bit wandery. It felt like the movie was way more streamlined. And then when it comes to, I think, talking about Taiwan and keeping it sort of entertaining while still talking about like the whole martial law thing, I think it's a really good little experience for that to start the conversation.
I think I also will cash. It's an interesting movie, and it's also somewhat educational because it's teaching you about a particular time period in a country that I'm not familiar with at all. So you're learning, but it's also this creepy atmosphere. You have these characters who are very defined, and you just learn so much about them. And then having the game as like a reference is also just like amazing. Getting able to see the differences in what the writers and directors chose to keep and what they chose to lose and what they chose to expand upon. Like it's a good movie. I would highly recommend it. I don't know. I watched the show too. I don't know if the show is any good, but whatever. Just throw it out there. But thank you so much, Aiden, for hopping on here with me. And once again, can you remind everyone where they can find you?
All right. Well, I'm Dead3y on YouTube. That's threes instead of e's, and I've been streaming lately, so come check those out.
Yes. I've been watching his streams. He's pretty good. Enjoy. As always, thank you guys for listening. Good night.